Hey, what is up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Southern Gin Flavor. My name is Jason, and I work with Chef Style Boston. It's my private company for private chefing here in Boston, but since the pandemic began, I am at home, and I'm cooking for you guys, and I'm hoping you're able to take a little bit out of it because I enjoy it. So today we're gonna get into some biscuits and gravy, but first, we're gonna make a drink. What are we gonna make? Well, I call it my Gingy Mojo, and the reason I call it my Gingy Mojo is because it is a gin martini with ginger, obviously mint, a little bit of kaffir lime, sweet tea, just a little bit, and then a little squeeze of lime, and that's it. So we're gonna get started with that. See how it's gonna end up. It's gonna be delicious, guys. That I can promise you. Let's start with a little bit of ice. Here, this is my simple syrup. So the simple syrup that I made earlier actually has a little bit of ginger already in it, just a little bit. So I'm not trying to get any kind of crazy overpowering flavor, just something subtle. When it comes to simple syrup, and I haven't said this in the past, you can, if you make a 1-to-1 ratio, so 1 part sugar, 1 part water, you can typically keep that in your refrigerator for about a month. If you do a heavier one, like a 2-to-1, that'll actually last a little longer, sometimes up to 6 months. You just want to be careful because if you're making a cold pressed simple syrup, so if you're not heating it up, sometimes you can have a little more mold growth and other bacteria growing, so you just want to kind of keep an eye on that. So here we have the simple syrup that is done with the ginger. It's my fancy bottle of soda because I don't need all of it. Here's my gin Hendrick's because it's my fave, and a big chunk of ginger. So what I did was I just snapped a piece of ginger off. I use a spoon, I don't use a peeler. And I'm just gonna scrape the outside of the ginger because even though I have some ginger in my simple syrup, I still wanna have some of that freshness inside the actual drink itself when I go to get down in there with the muddler. But I'm not gonna muddle too much because I don't wanna damage my mint and bruise it and make it all gray and start to get bitter. So here I have a little piece of ginger. I'm just gonna cut that little piece off right there at the end, get this other out of my way. Slice that up. I'm not trying to get it crazy small because I like the chunks in there. Actually, let me take this ice back out. Get that right there. So we get the ginger right inside. And some fresh mint, because why not? I love fresh more than anything. Sometimes the plants don't even last that long because I end up, after I get a few or after they actually start blooming, I can't wait and ended up plucking them way too much. So I'm not gonna cut this, I'm just gonna rip it and toss it right in. And I'm gonna do a little bit of the simple syrup. So we're gonna do about 2 tablespoons of simple syrup for there. And I'm going to do 1.5 ounces of Hendrick's gin. Little shake of the tea. So this morning I started the sun tea because sun tea is the best way to go. It brews better, it's slower. When you can slowly raise the temperature of the water that you're steeping in, you're just gonna get a better flavor. You're gonna be able to impart that whatever you have that you're brewing into your medium, if it's water, a lot better. So sun brew tea, I got up this morning, put some bags in there with some kaffir lime that I ripped up from the freezer, put it in the bottle, set it up on the rooftop, just brought it back down about 30 minutes ago, and it is delicious. So I'm just gonna put a splash of the tea, just a little splash right on the side. Yep. I'm gonna do a fresh squeeze of lime. And then a little bit of soda water. Now I'm not gonna muddle this right now because I don't want to break them up too much. And I like the way the flavor is once you just rip the mint, you just toss it in. Right over top of that drink. Nice. Cheers, guys. Gingy Mojo. I made it up. It's delicious though. See, I need to be up top on the roof deck right now. I was gonna do an original session where I was gonna cook everything on the grill because I can do biscuits and everything out there. But when I got up there earlier, it was a little too warm and I didn't think you wanted to see me sweating all over the biscuits. So what are we making today? Why biscuits and gravy? Because it's one of my favorite dishes. Growing up, we started off, my mom would always make chip beef. So the little cans of the chip beef you could get in the can, and we would have that, and then biscuits and gravy. So we always were having one or the other, and that's just one of my big time comfort foods. Cold, hot, put it in, like it doesn't matter. I'm gonna pile it up on that biscuit and I'm gonna eat it. And right here, what I'm gonna add today that we didn't do growing up was rosemary. I'm gonna add some fresh rosemary to the biscuits. They're gonna be legit amazing. So we're gonna get started here first. We're gonna get started with the biscuits. The biscuits don't take that long, honestly. 15 minutes to cook maybe, but when it comes to the preparation doesn't take too much time either. It's really just making sure you understand the process of making biscuits. Not difficult, but it's overworking the dough versus underworking the dough. Why we don't want to overwork the dough in biscuits? Because we don't want that extra gluten. We want something super delicate. It's just you want to bite into that buttermilk biscuit and you just want to feel it just fall apart in your mouth. But it's still holding structure because you want it to hold that gravy, right? But one of the keys to getting really good fluffy biscuits obviously is going to be cold butter. So how are we going to start off with that today? Well, we have a few things here. I have some flour. I have some butter. Using a lower gluten content flour is even better. I'm using all purpose because this is all I had. But if you can use a lower gluten content flour, that's just going to give you a more delicate biscuit. So I would recommend it if you are able to come across that flour right now. Here we have some salt. We have a little bit of sugar, and we have some baking powder for a little extra rise. Here we have half buttermilk and half heavy creamer because I ran out of buttermilk. That was the last little bit I had. And I have about 6 ounces of super cold butter for a really good reason. Now, buttermilk biscuits or anything that's going to be super fluffy, we're able to get it real fluffy like that because of the release of moisture and that rapid release that you're going to get in the oven, which we're going to get as a combination between the baking powder and the butter that we're going to be putting in with the flour. So once we get started, I'm going to add right here about 2.5 cups of flour, and I have my salt. That's 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Sugar, 1 tablespoon, and for baking powder, you're going to do 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon. Now for this, you can take a whisk and just give the whisk a little stir around on the inside, get the ingredients fully incorporated. You don't have to get crazy with it. You can sift it if you want, that's fine. A lot of times I will sift, just not doing it today because I'm super rushed only for myself because I really want to eat these biscuits and gravy. So now we got that fully incorporated, nice and mixed in. I'm gonna go ahead and take my butter. Now this is key, right? This is super key. You can make sure the butter is very cold. Don't keep it out of room temperature at all. Keep it in the refrigerator until the very last minute because we are going to grate it directly into the flour. And the reason we're doing that, because once we get the butter down into the flour, we're gonna coat all of these individual pieces that are shredding off. That way they don't keep melting, because once we get all these ingredients mixed in together and we get it in the oven, that first spring you're gonna get the double acting baking powder, you're gonna get some rise from that, but once the butter starts to melt in between these layers, it's gonna leave a little bit of space and you're gonna get this rapid release of moisture, and that extra boost of steam is gonna shoot these biscuits up over the top and your head is going to explode because they're amazing, amazing. So again, 6 ounces of butter. Just be careful if you're gonna go past that point, or really pay attention to the kind of butter you're using. Some butter has a higher moisture content than others. So being aware of what you're cooking and baking with is extremely important. So we got all that butter inside. It looks like a bunch of mozzarella cheese. I'm gonna show you what that looks like now before we start coating it. You can see here, hey Bridget, sister down in Carolina. Now, biscuits and gravy, my mom would cook these growing up, and she would always have extra biscuits, and her hope was she would have extra biscuits left over, which was kind of rare because we would always kill those biscuits and gravy. But she would always save a few for the next morning because she would make cheese biscuits, and I'm telling you, there's nothing better than a few of these biscuits that have been sliced open with some sharp cheddar put on and put into an oven on broil. I don't know, I need to stop right now and go eat some of those because those cheese, and we'd fight over them too. My mom would have these little round tins, and it would be my 2 older sisters, and my brother wasn't around yet, but he eventually got hungry and started eating them too, and we kind of fight over them a little bit. So here I'm just mixing all the butter into the flour because I want to coat this flour as much as possible, or excuse me, coat the butter as much as possible with all this flour. They say technically getting down to about pea size, but just do kind of what feels consistent. So you can see it's very, very clumpy, but you don't see any loose butter, you don't see any melted butter. That's exactly how you want it. Now you can use a stand mixer for this. I'm not using my stand mixer today, believe it or not, because I do use it for everything. Only because you can overwork your dough easily with a stand mixer if you're not used to it. I'm used to it and I can mix it all the time, but for those of you who don't, I want to show you how easy it is because you do not want to mix this too much. You really want to get the wet ingredients, so the buttermilk and the heavy creamer that we're about to use. You want to get it in there and slowly mix it in together, get it to absorb, but just mix it until it's just enough to get everything to come together. If you go past that point, what you risk doing is melting the butter, and the butter may start to break down. You'll start to develop gluten, so your biscuits are going to get tougher. You don't want that, right? Nobody wants that. So now in my bowl right here, I'm making a kind of like a small well, so a little space in the middle. And I'm going to add, again, this is a cup. I'll go ahead and add it all because I know it's going to take it. And I'm just going to give a couple turns, making sure that I'm being purposeful with my movements. So when I'm mixing everything, don't just go crazy and stirring around like a maniac, all right? So just make sure your turns are purposeful and that you're coating everything in as much as possible in almost like a single movement. Don't overthink it, because I know I'm saying a lot and you're going to overanalyze it, but the purpose here is, again, to prevent yourself from overmixing, prevent yourself from developing too much gluten, and not melting the butter, right? They say, I watched a million different videos. I like to see how people do their different kinds of biscuits. Some people will put their flour into the refrigerator freezer, keep it cool. All these things can be done that may elevate your biscuit a little bit. I mean, not elevate like make it rise, but it may elevate it as far as taste, texture, something to play with. So considering all those aspects when it comes to science and food, which I'm a science geek, you guys know that already, and just learn a little bit. So now we have everything. It's looking pretty good. It's coming together pretty good. And now I'm just going to use my hands and I'm going to squeeze it together, but I'm not going to use my hands too much because remember, 98.6, right? 98 degrees, not the boy band from the late 90s. But you don't want to do this too much because you'll start to melt the butter that's inside, and that's not going to make for a good biscuit. All right, so I'm going to turn my dough out here. I know it looks really dry right now because I haven't started to squeeze it together. So here, I'm going to give it a little pressure. Again, bringing everything together. And if you've seen videos of anybody from down south making biscuits and you see all these crumbly parts, they know what they're doing. Don't throw more stuff in there. You see I don't have any flour on here right now. That's fine because we're going to slowly get everything fully incorporated. And as I fold and mash, some people will do this with a roller, which I'm going to use here momentarily. You can use a bench scraper to keep your hands off of it to help fold it. And what you're doing is folding here this is a lamination process where you're creating layers upon layer. Since we have all of that, the butter that was in there, if you just start mashing it together and mixing it up, you'll still get a good biscuit, right? It's still going to taste delicious. Why? Because it's carbs and butter, and who doesn't love that? But it's just not going to be as fluffy. You're not going to get that rise. So what you want to do, again, without overworking it too much, bringing all the flour together, keeping the butter intact. And now this is how I do it. I get about a rectangle first, and using a bench scraper is really good because you can press the edges with it and get everything nice and even. And now you can take your roller. I start in the middle, just roll a little bit here, spin, roll. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little flour. Not too much, just enough that's needed. So I didn't flour my bench. It's a no-no, that's bacon no-no right there. But how would you know not what to do if I didn't do it wrong the first time, right? All right, so we're gonna roll these out, and don't worry about making a mess. Like We spend all this time and money buying all these great instruments at home to use, and then we spend all this extra time trying not to use them because we don't want to make a mess. Make a mess, get in there, enjoy it. Roll those biscuits out. Roll that beautiful bean footage and just get these biscuits done. Don't overwork them, right? So here, you can roll them out to about a 1/2 inch. Again, this is just personal preference. Sometimes what I'll do with these biscuits, because I'm gonna use a cutter, round cutter for these, I'll actually shape these into a long rectangle and then slice them down the middle and make square biscuits. And the reason I do square biscuits is because I don't like overworking that excess that I get when we use pastry cutters. You know what I'm talking about, when you go down with your rings and you cut all your beautiful biscuits and then you have this crazy fishnet looking thing that's left on the outside and you ball it up and you mash it and you roll it back out. And those never taste or look as good as the first one because the lamination isn't there, right? So if you do square biscuits, they're delicious. Actually, let's go ahead and do those now since I'm talking about it. Let's make some square biscuits. They have gravy going right over top of them, right? So what does it matter what the shape is? Because I'm gonna be maximizing it. I'm all about really trying to prevent not just waste, but if you have a good product, don't get so hung up on what the shape is gonna be. If you're worried about, think about the flavor first. Think about all of those other things that are really more important before you start trying to go overly manipulate your food. All right, so this, you can use a knife because you don't want to press the layers down. That's what you'll hear when you're working with dough, is being careful not to mash stuff down because you'll seal the layers and it won't rise as well. Now, if you're gonna use a cutter, dip the cutter down into a little bit of flour, light flour, tap it off, and then press down, right? Boom. Look at this. Oh, goodness. And you can even see, if you look really close, you can see how the layers are going to develop. Look at that, guys. Come on now. Come on. I'm gonna put that one right behind me. We're gonna go ahead and get the oven on. So the oven is gonna be preheated to 450 degrees. However, what I'm not using today is I'm not gonna use a convection oven. Why is that, Jason? Why not use a convection? Everybody talks about it. It's better. A lot of times it can be, but when it comes to baked goods, when you use a convection oven, that air, you have a fan that turns on, it starts circulating the air in, it tends to be warmer, it tends to be actually a little moister, which is not what we want for baked goods. We want that crust to form, we want that Maillard reaction, so that the changing of your carbs and it shifting that over and the sugars are crusting and forming this awesome layer. But all that occurs in a better, more conventional oven. So we're gonna use conventional setting today. So I went ahead and start the setting. Again, 450 degrees. It shouldn't take you too long to heat up. But for the rest of these, because I already told you, I don't care what the shape looks like. Because ideally, right, if I'm gonna have a serving, this is a nice big square biscuit that's gonna rise up amazing. And then could be like a single serving instead of having a bunch of biscuits. So you have just one giant, like oversized biscuit and gravy. Why not? So I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of these cut up. I'm gonna toss them behind me. I am gonna let them rest for a minute. Let's go ahead and we'll cut a few more circles. And I'll put this dough aside because I am gonna reuse this. Do not throw anything away. Now, because this is double acting baking powder, I am gonna set these behind me and I'm gonna let these rest just while we get the sausage gravy started. And by that time, we'll be able to toss everything into the oven and get those going. Because once they get in, I mean, you can imagine through 450 degrees in an oven like that, these biscuits are going to shoot up. They're gonna be done. Don't overcook them, right? So keep an eye on them. Use all your senses, your sense of sight, smell, sound, everything. So get in there, make sure they're not cooked. Get them out when you're ready. Don't wait for them to cool off either. Just toss them right in. One thing I forgot to do, because I was running them off, I didn't add my rosemary. But that's okay because we're going to be adding some fresh sage, some fresh oregano into the sausage gravy. It's going to be amazing. So it's going to be just as good. I like these the rosemary plant. We keep that up on our patio just because it's a good smell. So we have hibiscus, petunias, a bunch of other stuff up there, and then this giant rosemary bush. And it's just amazing because you can smell it everywhere on the deck. Unless you don't like rosemary, in which case I'm sorry. And you're not invited anyway. All right, so coming up with the gravy, That is one of my favorite things. When it comes to sausage, your proteins like that, that is one of my favorite things breakfast wise to eat. But for some reason, I never eat it enough. I don't eat it that often. I feel like when it's something that's one of my favorite meals like that, I tend to forget about it. Not today though. We're gonna get right into it. And I don't think Willie, my partner, knows that I'm making biscuits and gravy, so it'll be a nice little surprise for him when he gets home because he loves my biscuits, let me tell you. So go ahead and get this area open up over here so we can get our cast iron on, because why am I gonna make biscuits and gravy a southern style if I'm not using a cast iron, right? That right behind me. All right, so we're gonna toss that on over here. We're gonna get a low setting first. And now again, I'm using induction. You can use your cast iron on top of an induction, it's amazing. Just be careful with your heat because it will tend to heat up depending on what quality of induction you have. It may heat up a little quicker in the center, so you just really wanna keep an eye on what your hot spots might be as to not overcook your stuff, right? Now, we got some more goodness. I have some milk. I have some bacon. We're not gonna use a lot of it, just a little bit. And we have some fresh ground sausage. Now, growing up, Jimmy Dean Sage, a couple other different Sage type sausage, that was clutch, that was the go-to sausage, and it still is amazing. We had this sausage in the fridge already, so I'm gonna use this. Came from Italy, really good. They have an amazing butcher box. I talked about this last week, I believe. So really good ground sausage from there. So we're heating up over here nicely already. That's another great thing about induction. You don't have to stand around and wait because it's gonna get up to temp pretty quick. I'm gonna go ahead and get that sausage right in there. One thing I'm gonna do a little differently after I take a drink is for my sausage and gravy, I like to add just a few pieces of bacon. Not a lot because I do not want a bacon sausage and gravy. I want a sausage and gravy that has just a little bit of that essence of bacon, right? That good fattiness underneath that sometimes if you get the right amount, you don't quite know it's bacon, you just got this great goodness, fattiness, porkiness in there. And when somebody tells you it's bacon, it all comes together. So now that I have the pork in there, the ground pork, we're gonna go ahead and chop that up, make sure it's even because we wanna try to have that cook even. I'm gonna start off, I'm at a low to medium heat right now. Now with my with my bacon, few pieces are going to go a long way in this. And this is a thicker cut bacon, also from Italy. No paid promo, we just love them. I'm just gonna cut literally 3 slices. 3 slices, 3 deep, right? So really small pieces. I'm gonna dice those up into small little cubes. Boom. Put more dice. Toss that in. Give another white. And another drink. One of my many first jobs growing up was working, and anybody from down south knows this restaurant, was Po Folks. And Po Folks was a fast food dine-in restaurant that served everything southern. We served tea in mason jars. We had all you could eat catfish, all you could eat country fried steak, all you could eat chicken. We had all the stuff that I loved growing up. And their biscuits were some of the best biscuits I can remember growing up. I would get there to work at the beginning of the shift, and I'd go back there because obviously we knew some of the line cooks, and I'd get a few of those biscuits and I'd take them right out to the side. I was 16 years old, cover them up with some jelly, some strawberry jam or jelly. Woo! That'd be it. They didn't have gravy, but I could figure it out with my own because we still had this white gravy that went with the country fried steak. So I would make my little own makeshift biscuits and gravy at work all the time. And it was amazing. All right, so my sausage is starting to brown up a little bit. I'm gonna turn the heat up just a tad so we can get going a little better there. Now we're gonna look at some of the herbs that we have. So my sage, a couple weeks ago, I believe it was meatballs. And I had some sage, and this is from the fresh sage that we had. I dried it, so now this is dried fresh sage. And you can hear it. You can see how good it still looks. It's a nice little piece of sage, but boom, nice and dry. It maintained its original flavor and aroma, and it's just delicious. So my oven is ready to go. I'm gonna go ahead and pop them in. I have it set right now for 15 minutes. Take a little bit of the sage, and the good thing about this sage is since it is dried in this form, again, it's just amazing. You can see how gorgeous that sage is. Look at that, just dried sage, whole pieces. I'm just gonna take a handful of these whole pieces of sage, and I'm just gonna crumble them in my hand. And I'm gonna sprinkle all of this sagey goodness right into the sausage, where it's gonna go right into my mouth, and I'm gonna enjoy it a little bit later. Give that little, honestly, smell-o-vision needs to be a thing already. It's 2020, guys, what's going on? This is delicious. It is smelling so good. For me, like fresh sage, that is the essence. When I say the essence of my childhood, we didn't grow sage, not that I can remember, but it was just how the flavors that we cooked with and my mom cooked with, that was just so wonderful. Here I'm just having some small pieces of fresh thyme I'm gonna drop in because I love thyme. If you have the time, go get some. Don't mind my dad jokes. No one laughs at them except me and my mother. All right, we're getting some good browning. Now, again, this is all personal preference when it comes to how you're cooking your sausage in your pan. So you can see I have good browning going on here. Everything is nice and evenly distributed. Now, one thing that I just started doing that I didn't used to cook my biscuits and gravy this way. I'm gonna show you what I'm doing a little differently. And a lot of you probably already do that because it's a known way technique of cooking. I just never did it this way. Put a little butter in there, and by little butter I mean extra butter. About 1.5 tablespoons. Again, personal preference. Give that a good mix around. Make sure it starts melting. Now the next step. So we're actually, believe it or not, we're getting pretty close to being done with the first steps of this biscuit and gravy. But what we're gonna have to do now is get ready for the thickening process. What I would normally use is I would use milk, creamer, cold, and cornstarch, and that would always be my thickening agent. But what I'm doing today is I'm just gonna take the 2 tablespoons of flour, and I'm just gonna take it right over top of my sausage and my bacon mixture that's in the pan. And I'm going to, let me get that in here. I'm gonna go ahead and sprinkle it over evenly, don't clump it up in one area. And what I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna mix that flour in. Don't do that with cornstarch, y'all. Don't do it. I'm gonna mix that, unless you mix it really well, but this is a flour technique. So now I'm just gonna mix all the flour in, and what I'm doing is, aside from obviously making sure that it's evenly distributed, I'm now cooking the flour. So flour needs to be cooked, so whether it's in bread or any other dough or not, it still has to be cooked, because if not, when you're done, you're gonna get this gritty, raw flour texture, and it's gonna feel like you need to push it through a piece of cheesecloth to get rid of it, and that's not what you want. So we're gonna give that a few turns. Again, making sure everything is getting nice and coated, because the next step is gonna be when we toss in the butter, or excuse me, not the butter, the milk, the heavy cream. Once we get that temperature up, the flour that is now coated in the sausage with all of the amazing flavor, right? We have some fond that's developing on the bottom of the pan, and the fond is that's where all your flavor is. So all the crusty stuff that's on the pan, don't get rid of it unless you burned it. Start over, but don't try to keep your burnt stuff. And the flavor is going to keep giving back. It's going to treat you nice. If you treat your food nice, this is going to treat you nice in the end. I'm going to show you what we look like here. And I had a lot of people ask how I'm able to hold this cast iron. When you're using induction, the heat goes to where it needs to go to, and I don't have this extreme hot handle to hold right now. However, it will eventually get warm. But you can see everything's nice and coated now. Get that back on. Turn the heat down a little bit. And now we're gonna go ahead and start with some of the milk. And I'm gonna pour that evenly over. Now, one thing with this, if you're a biscuit and gravy person like me, everybody has their ideal level of consistency, right? The thickness of their gravy. Some people like a super thick gravy, some people don't. Some people like it a little runnier. I like it like in between. So I want the gravy to adhere to the biscuit, but I also want it to kind of fall down off the side of it. If it's not doing that, then that's too thick, and I don't want that. So it's either too much of your cornstarch or too much of your flour to thicken it. So in essence, if you really want to thicken something good, about 1 tablespoon to 1.5 tablespoons of cornstarch is going to thicken about 1.5 to 2 cups of whatever your gravy is. So keep that in mind when you're mixing everything together. Now, in order to get this to thicken though, we need to bring it back up to a simmer. So I'm not going to bring this up to a roll and boil, but to get the starch molecules that are in the flour to activate and thicken the way it should, now we need to rise the temperature. I'm not going to crank it up super high. Why are you going to do that? I'm giving a lot of my love, and I'm not going to say time because this isn't a super quick thing or super fast thing. It doesn't take a long time. But now it's starting to simmer. And once it starts to simmer, you make sure you're giving it that stir. And you'll feel it. You'll feel it, and you'll see it start to thicken as you give it that turn. And behind me, oh my gosh! Now I have to show you guys these biscuits real quick in the oven. Ooh. I don't know if you can see them, but they're popping up now. All right. And just the color, when you're using fresh herbs, especially with biscuits and gravy, and you guys don't know what I'm talking about, if you ever make it at home or you try making it at home, you buy your pre-mixed sausage, which again is fine because I'll do that myself sometimes just because I like the nostalgic aspect of, when I was younger. But the vibrant color of your herbs and just that freshness that's in there, to me, you can't replace that, especially if you're cooking for other people, even yourself, because the flavor, one, is far superior. But two, just the aesthetics and how it looks is amazing. And it smells delicious. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start some of my seasoning. Now typically what you'll hear is you're always seasoning in every layer as you cook. So every time I would add a new ingredient, I would do a little bit of seasoning. When it comes to my biscuits and gravy, I do all not all of my seasoning, but my salt and my pepper right there towards the end. I don't know if you can hear it, guys, but it's got a really good simmer now, and it's really started to thicken up really nicely. Now I had all the milk I was going to add at one time, but another reason, if you're going to use flour, especially if you're going to use flour, depending on the humidity and stuff in the air, you may have a different thickness that results. So you don't want to dump all of your milk in at one time, because then what's going to happen is you're just going to start chasing back and forth the thickness versus is it too watery, and you're just going to go from adding more flour, more starch to more milk, and then you're going to have a diluted flavor. Just don't do that, all right? Bring this back over to you again. And you can see it's really starting to, oh, there you go, guys. Look at that. Biscuits are getting close to done, believe it or not. Even with 6 minutes, they're rising super, super fast. Sometimes I will add a little oregano. I didn't do it for this dish because once I got the sage in there, the sage was such a powerful, in the best way possible, strong smell and aroma that hit me. I didn't want to dilute that down with the other flavors, other profiles, so I just want to keep that sage in there because it smells really delicious. And this is pretty close to the thickness that I like. I like my biscuits and gravy. If I was gonna give a ratio, I'd say like 3 to 1. 3 part sausage to 1 part gravy, but I like a lot of sausage in there. I like small pieces for me personally, but I just like flavor to be on every aspect, every bite that I'm gonna get. These are gonna be bomb, guys. Now the biscuit recipe was a part of a modification from Chef Barry Maiden. He's a chef from Hungry Mother, I believe it was, restaurant in Cambridge, and he's also one of the chef instructors at Boston University for their food and wine program. So I used a portion of his recipe and I modified a little bit, but his rosemary biscuit recipe, amazing. He finishes them off with a little bit of turbinado sugar on top, and he does this pork slider with pickles, and it's like, I can't even explain or put words into it because it literally is just an amazing dish. Oh yeah. Now we are finished with these. So like maybe 10, 15 minutes for your biscuits and gravy. This isn't one of those things that the longer it goes, necessarily the better it's gonna get. All right, so this is really good consistency that I want. Now, even though I said 15 minutes for the biscuits at 450 degrees, don't ever set a timer and walk away from it. You can walk away from it initially, but don't wait for that timer to go off because you really do want to keep an eye on it, because I can tell looking in, just with the color of the biscuits and where they are, that they're getting pretty close to being done. And even though I have roughly 4 minutes left, reach out, just squeeze one real quick. You don't have to do that. That's something I do at home because I'm gonna tear that biscuit up with some jelly anyway. And give it a test, see how it is. If you don't do a lot of lamination at home, where you're using a lot of butter in your pastry, whatever it is you're working with, biscuits, you don't want to keep opening that. I need to just know at the time frame where the biscuits are, where they've risen, because if you open it too soon, you're gonna lose that air that's starting to develop from the rapid melting of the butter, the activation of the second stage of your baking powder, and if you open that oven and you release that heat, you're gonna miss out on these amazing rises coming from the biscuits, and you're not gonna get it. All right, so that's not what you want. While these biscuits are getting ready though, I'm gonna go ahead and get my plate ready. Because I always eat mine with a side of jam. I love sweet and savory. Nothing goes better even with anything in my opinion, because I have the biggest sweet tooth in the world, is a little bit of jam. I'm a strawberry fiend when it comes to anything strawberries. My sister can tell you, she's down in Carolina, she picks some of the most beautiful strawberries that I've ever seen. I still don't have any yet though, no shade, just some good lemonade. Mojito. All right, guys. Time for this square biscuit. Now with my biscuits and gravy, I don't cut my biscuit open. I like to have my biscuit right on top and I just dump my gravy right on top and then I go in after it, so that's exactly what we're gonna do. What am I doing? I haven't even added any of my pepper, any of my salt. I haven't tasted it. Rule number one, chefs, like that's something you're tasting your food the entire time. I just broke every single one of my own rules. See where we go with pepper. Oh yeah, pepper, a little more pepper. Because I love, when it comes to pepper, that's something, for me, I feel like I can never have enough of. I just love fresh ground pepper. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with about 2 teaspoons of salt. Get with some more pepper. We'll stir. I'm so happy right now. I know you can't see it, but I'm very, very happy right now about this. I don't know. I was gonna say I need to go home, but I'm home, so I don't need to go anywhere. That's all I can do is shake my head about this one. And I'm gonna put a little bit of strawberry jam on the side, again, because I'm a sweet and savory person. Mama Jernigan. These are my biscuits and gravy, inspired by her because she was the one who got me eating so much of these. And you can see here, look at that. And you can see, look at the colors. So you can see the herbs, the breakout of the herbs and the biscuits and gravy. And you can definitely tell the difference between biscuits and gravy that are made with your dry herbs. Again, no shade, everybody uses what they have. But this biscuit though, for real, this is the best. No lie, 100%. And well, you'll say this because he says I only make the best stuff when he's not here. That's not true. That's a lie. This is bomb. This is on point, 100%. So what I use today for this, the only thing I used 1 cup of your fresh ground pork. I used about, we're gonna say 15 grams of fresh chopped thick bacon, fresh sage, no oregano, even though I said that at the very beginning, salt and pepper to taste, butter, 2 tablespoons of flour, boom, you're good to go. You're all set. Biscuits, super easy, roughly 360 grams of flour, 6 ounces of your butter. You're gonna use about 1.5 to 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of double acting baking powder, and 1 cup of buttermilk. And if you don't have buttermilk, that's okay. You can use other fatty substances. I mix cream. If you have real fatty cream with milk, use regular milk, that's fine. But I want you to do that. Make sure you're grating it and trying that aspect of grating your cold cheese down into your flour to get those layers. I really want to know how it turns out. So if you do try this biscuit and gravy recipe at home, definitely let me know. Comment down in the comments below and send me some of your photos. So if you do have any photos of what you have, send it to Chef Style Boston at chefstyleboston.com. I'd love to see what you guys are doing. So thank you so much for joining me today. Again, my name is Jason with Southern Gent Flavor, and I hope to see you guys all again soon. Cheers.